What We Heard Report, Accessibility Legislation Consultations, in partnership with Disability Policy Office, Department of Children, Seniors, and Social Development, Provincial Advisory Council on the Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities, the Coalition of Persons with Disabilities, Newfoundland and Labrador. This report follows the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador's accessible communication policy that uses clear language, accessible formatting, and taglines to ensure information is clear, readable, and understood. Alternate formats are available. Please contact disabilitypolicy@gov.nl.ca. Message from the Minister. In January and February 2019, the Department of Children, Seniors, and Social Development, through the Disability Policy Office, embarked on a public engagement process in partnership with the Coalition of Persons with Disabilities, Newfoundland and Labrador, and the Provincial Advisory Council for the Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities. This process was to help inform the development of Made in Newfoundland and Labrador accessibility legislation. We are pleased to release the What We Heard document that summarizes what we heard and will help us create new accessibility legislation. I'm proud that this was the most accessible consultation process for the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador to date. Throughout the consultation process, held in Happy Valley Goose Bay, Corner Brook, Gander, St. John's, and online, we had strong support and engagement from leaders in the community of persons with disabilities, individuals with disabilities, and various stakeholders from public and private sectors. These sessions were made accessible through real-time captioning, American Sign Language, FM system, and having alternate formats ready and in person for on-demand use. Additionally, participants were able to submit feedback by written or video submissions, including emailing, texting, faxing, and calling, including video relay services. Throughout the province, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians shared their personal stories and experiences, their challenges, successes, hopes, and aspirations for accessibility legislation. This open dialogue has informed the provincial government on barriers faced by persons with disabilities and how these can be removed. This will help guide the development of new provincial accessibility legislation. This engagement process was a very important step towards our goal of a truly inclusive Newfoundland and Labrador. The contributions that people made throughout the process will certainly guide the department as we work with our partners to develop accessibility legislation. Thank you for being a part of this very important process. Overview. The Government of Newfoundland and Labrador is committed to working with advocacy and community groups to develop new provincial accessibility legislation. The purpose of the proposed accessibility legislation is to prevent and remove barriers and make a more inclusive province. This requires establishing long-term and proactive approaches to address accessibility issues. The engagement process. In 2018, Disability Policy Office, DPO, a division of the Department of Children, Seniors, and Social Development, CSSD, created a planning committee with the Public Engagement and Planning, PEP, or PEP division, and the Coalition of Persons with Disabilities, Newfoundland and Labrador, the Coalition. The Planning Committee engaged with the public, stakeholders, and consulted with the Provincial Advisory Council for the Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities. The Planning Committee developed the engagement process and a discussion guide, which was available in print, Braille, various accessible digital versions, and through an American Sign Language, ASL, interpretation video with audio. The Engage NL website posted an overview of the engagement process and the discussion guide so that members of the public could provide feedback. A series of consultation sessions and an online webinar were held that focused on the questions in the discussion guide. Disability-related supports were available to ensure sessions were inclusive, such as real-time captioning and sign language interpretation. Individuals also participated by email, phone, text message, and postal mail. Sessions were held in January and February 2019, with 2 sessions taking place in each community of Gander, Happy Valley Goose Bay, Corner Brook, and St. John's. The afternoon sessions were for invited stakeholders, and the evening sessions were open to the public. There was also an online engagement session that followed the same format and agenda of the in-person engagement sessions. Following the engagement process, there was an accessibility symposium workshop in St. John's on February 28, 2019, with in-person and online participation. 65 stakeholders participated in this event. The symposium workshop reviewed accessibility legislation in other jurisdictions and included a keynote speaker and panelists with experience and expertise in accessibility legislation. The speakers presented on experiences from other Canadian provinces, national considerations, and practices of accessibility legislation. In addition, a report back was provided of what we have heard to date from the in-person, online, and written feedback through the engagement process. The symposium workshop included an afternoon discussion on whether or not disability should be defined in the accessibility legislation, the enforcement of the legislation, community engagement in the development of standards, and community's insight on the timing to proceed with the proposed accessibility legislation was also discussed.